Hello, and welcome back to the Sleepy Darwin. Whether you're here to let the weight of the day slowly dissolve, to find peace in the quiet hours, or to simply let your thoughts drift through the mysteries that surround us, you've found exactly where you need to be. Tonight, we're exploring one of the most captivating puzzles the human mind has ever pondered. What would actually happen if time itself simply stopped? It's a question that has haunted physicists, philosophers, and dreamers alike. A thought experiment so profound that it touches everything from the beating of your heart to the dance of distant galaxies. We'll wander gently through frozen light rays, motionless molecules, and the strange silence that would blanket a universe caught between one moment and the next. Before we begin this slow journey through temporal impossibilities, if these quiet explorations help you find calm, a like and subscribe would mean the world to me. It keeps this little sanctuary of sleepy science alive in the endless scroll of the internet. And please, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time shows on your clock right now. There's something beautifully ironic about discussing stop time while we're all moving through it together. I hope this video isn't so fascinating that it keeps you wide awake pondering paradoxes. But if it does, at least you'll drift off with your mind full of impossible physics and temporal puzzles. So settle in, let your breathing slow, and let's explore what happens when the universe holds its breath. Time. What a strange and wonderful companion we keep. Right now, as you listen to these words, you're riding along with the most mysterious force in existence. It carries you from moment to moment like a gentle river, never asking permission, never explaining where it's taking you next. And yet, isn't it curious how intimate our relationship with time really is? Think about it for a moment. Time is more personal to you than your own heartbeat. Every memory you hold dear, every hope you nurture for tomorrow, every breath you take right now, all of it exists only because time graciously allows you to experience the flowing dance between what was, what is, and what might be. Time is simultaneously the most universal human experience and the most profoundly private one. We all share the same cosmic river, yet each of us experiences its current in our own unique way. And what is that experience, really? That mysterious sensation of now that seems to glide so smoothly from one moment to the next, like a soap bubble drifting on summer air. The now you experienced when you first pressed play on this video has already slipped away into then. The now of this very sentence is dissolving even as I speak it. There's something almost heartbreakingly beautiful about this, isn't there? The way the present moment seems to exist for just long enough to be noticed, then gracefully steps aside to make room for the next. I wonder, when did you first become aware of time? Perhaps as a child, lying in bed on Christmas Eve, feeling like morning would never come? Or maybe during a particularly wonderful afternoon that seemed to stretch on forever, until suddenly the streetlights were coming on and you realized hours had somehow disappeared without your permission. Time has this peculiar habit of playing tricks on us, doesn't it? Sometimes generous, sometimes stingy, always mysterious. Humanity has been puzzling over time's nature for as long as we've been able to wonder about anything at all. Our ancestors looked up at the wheeling stars and saw time as a great cosmic circle, seasons returning, generations following familiar patterns, the dead joining their ancestors in an eternal dance that had no beginning and would have no end. The ancient Egyptians imagined time as a serpent biting its own tail, the Maya as interlocking wheels within wheels, each civilization trying to capture something that seemed to slip through their fingers like water. For thousands of years, we lived quite comfortably with these cyclical visions of time. Then along came Isaac Newton, with his precise mathematical mind and his pocket watch. And suddenly time became something different, a great cosmic clock ticking away at the same steady rate throughout the entire universe. Newton's time was absolute, uniform, flowing like a perfectly regulated river that touched every corner of reality with the same gentle current. In Newton's universe, time was the stage upon which all of physics performed, reliable as sunrise, predictable as mathematics. And this seemed to make perfect sense, until a young patent clerk named Albert Einstein started asking uncomfortable questions about the nature of light and space and the strange behavior of objects moving very, very fast. Einstein's gentle revolution changed everything we thought we knew about time, transforming it from Newton's universal backdrop into something far more personal, far more mysterious, and infinitely more beautiful. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Before we dive into Einstein's wonderful rabbit hole, let's spend a moment with something you know intimately, the subjective experience of time flowing at different speeds through your own life. You've felt it countless times, haven't you? The way an hour spent waiting in a doctor's office can feel like a small eternity, while an hour spent with someone you love seems to evaporate like morning mist. The way a pot of water refuses to boil when you're watching it, but somehow manages to boil over the moment you look away. There's that strange compression of time when you're completely absorbed in something you love, reading a captivating book, having a deep conversation, creating something beautiful with your hands, and suddenly you look up to discover that hours have passed without your noticing. Scientists call this temporal perception, and it turns out to be one of the most fascinating aspects of consciousness. Your brain is constantly constructing your sense of time from a symphony of neural activity, the firing of neurons, the flow of neurotransmitters, the intricate dance of electrical and chemical signals that somehow, miraculously, creates your experience of the flowing present moment. When you're bored or anxious, your brain pays more attention to the passage of time itself, making each moment feel stretched and significant. When you're engaged or happy, your attention flows outward into the world, and time seems to slip by unnoticed. It's as if your consciousness has different temporal gears, shifting between the slow contemplation of a lazy Sunday morning and the compressed intensity of an emergency. And here's something beautiful to consider as you settle into this exploration. Right now, in this very moment, time is flowing through you at exactly the rate it needs to. Not too fast, not too slow. You don't need to chase it or fight it or understand it completely. You can simply rest in its gentle current, like floating in a warm lake on a summer evening, supported by something much larger and more mysterious than yourself. Take a moment now, if you'd like, to notice your own relationship with time tonight. Are you someone who usually watches the clock, or do you prefer to let time flow unmarked? Do you feel rushed by time, or carried by it? There's no right answer. Of course, just your own unique way of dancing with this cosmic mystery we call duration. Let me tell you a bedtime story about space and time, but this is the kind of bedtime story that happens to be absolutely true, which makes it all the more wonderful. Once upon a time, not so very long ago, there lived a young man who spent his days examining patent applications and his evenings wondering about light. Albert Einstein, for that was his name, had noticed something peculiar about the speed of light. No matter how fast you were traveling when you measured it, light always seemed to be moving at exactly the same speed, roughly 300 million meters per second. This was very strange indeed. If you're driving down the highway at 60 miles per hour and another car passes you at 80 miles per hour, that car appears to be moving past you at 20 miles per hour. Simple addition and subtraction, but light refused to follow these reasonable rules. Whether you were standing perfectly still or racing through space at tremendous speed, light stubbornly insisted on moving past you at exactly the same rate. It was as if light had its own sense of propriety about speed limits, refusing to be hurried or slowed by anyone's motion. Einstein, being both curious and persistent, decided to take this strange behavior of light seriously. And when he did, he discovered something that changed our understanding of reality forever. He realized that space and time, which we'd always thought of as separate things, were actually woven together into a single unified fabric. Imagine, if you will, space and time as threads in the most beautiful cosmic tapestry ever created. You can't pull on one thread without affecting all the others. When you move through space, you inevitably stretch and compress the fabric of time itself. This fabric, this space-time, as we now call it, responds to matter and energy, like a soft mattress responds to the weight of someone lying down. Massive objects like stars and planets create gentle depressions in the fabric, and smaller objects naturally roll toward these depressions, following what we experience as the force of gravity. But here's the truly magical part. Time itself flows more slowly in those depressions, like a river meandering through a deep valley. Einstein called this relativity, and it means that time is not the universal, unchanging river that Newton imagined. Instead, time is more like a vast ocean where different currents flow at different speeds. Your time, right here where you are, flows at its own particular rate. Someone flying in an airplane overhead experiences time flowing just slightly faster. An astronaut on the International Space Station ages just a tiny bit more slowly than people on Earth's surface. These differences are usually so small as to be unnoticeable in everyday life. We're talking about fractions of seconds over entire lifetimes, but they're real, and they're measurable, and they tell us something profound about the universe we inhabit. Let me share with you one of the most beautiful and bittersweet stories in all of physics, the tale of the traveling twins. Imagine two identical twins, as close as siblings can be. One twin stays home, living a normal life on Earth. The other twin, seized by wanderlust, embarks on a journey to a distant star at nearly the speed of light. The journey takes many years, but when the traveling twin finally returns home, something extraordinary has happened. The twin who stayed on Earth has aged normally, perhaps 20 or 30 years have passed. But the traveling twin, having spent those years moving at tremendous speed through the cosmic ocean of space-time, has aged only a few years. They return home to find their identical twin now much older, perhaps with grey hair and laugh lines, while they themselves remain nearly as young as when they left. This isn't science fiction, it's a real consequence of time's flexible nature. Time truly does flow at different rates, depending on how fast you're moving through space. It's as if the universe has its own built-in method for ensuring that nothing can exceed light's cosmic speed limit. The faster you move through space, the slower you move through time, and these two effects balance each other perfectly. We see this happening all around us in subtle ways. The satellites that provide GPS navigation for your phone have to account for the fact that they're moving quickly through space and orbiting high above Earth's gravitational field. Their onboard clocks run just slightly faster than clocks on Earth's surface, only about 38 microseconds per day, but enough to throw off navigation calculations if not corrected. Every time you successfully find your way to a new restaurant using GPS, you're benefiting from our understanding of time's flexible nature. Gravity, too, has its own gentle way of affecting time's flow. The stronger gravities embrace, the more slowly time passes. You, sitting or lying wherever you are right now, are experiencing time slightly more slowly than someone standing on a ladder a few feet above you. The difference is unimaginably small. We're talking about nanoseconds over years, but it's there. A subtle reminder that time is always responding to the gravitational dance of matter and energy around us. This brings us to our central question. What would it mean, in Einstein's universe, for time to stop completely? Within the framework of relativity, stopping time would require infinite energy, an impossibility that the universe seems specifically designed to prevent. It would mean accelerating to the speed of light, which would require more energy than exists in the entire cosmos. Or it would mean creating infinite gravity, which would collapse space itself into a point smaller than imagination can grasp. In Einstein's beautiful unified universe of space-time, time cannot simply stop. It can slow down, it can speed up, it can be stretched and compressed like taffy, but it cannot come to a complete halt, at least not without breaking the very laws that govern reality. And yet, and this is where our journey becomes truly interesting, what if we could somehow step outside the rules of relativity? What if we could imagine, just for a moment, that time did manage to stop flowing? What if the great cosmic ocean suddenly became as still as glass, with every wave frozen in place? The impossibility of this scenario is precisely what makes it so fascinating to explore. By imagining what cannot happen, we gain a deeper appreciation for the elegant constraints that actually govern our universe. We discover beauty in the very rules that prevent time from stopping, and we find wonder in the realization that time's flexibility, its ability to flow fast or slow, is actually a fundamental feature of reality, not a bug to be corrected. So as we prepare to take this impossible journey together, into a universe where time has somehow managed to freeze itself, remember that we're not just exploring physics, we're exploring the landscape of wonder itself. We're asking what it means to exist in a universe governed by such beautiful and mysterious rules. And perhaps most importantly, we're cultivating a deeper gratitude for the gentle flow of time that carries us from moment to moment, allowing change and growth and the endless, beautiful unfolding of existence itself. Now we must venture into the strangest territory of all, the quantum realm, where time begins to behave like a shy dancer at the edge of perception, sometimes bold and definite, sometimes ethereal and uncertain. This is where our story takes its most mysterious turn, for in the quantum world, time itself seems to participate in the fundamental uncertainty that governs all of reality's smallest components. Picture, if you will, the world at its most fundamental level, not the world of objects and surfaces that we see and touch, but the deeper reality of atoms and electrons and photons. Here, nothing is quite as definite as it appears in our everyday experience. Particles exist in multiple states simultaneously, like cosmic possibilities waiting for the universe to make up its mind. And time, our faithful companion through this entire journey, reveals its most enigmatic face. In the quantum realm, Time plays a curious role in the famous uncertainty principle that Werner Heisenberg discovered nearly a century ago. Just as you cannot simultaneously know both the exact position and the exact momentum of a particle, there's a similar relationship between time and energy. The more precisely you try to pinpoint when something happens in the quantum world, the less precisely you can know how much energy is involved. It's as if time itself becomes fuzzy around the edges, softening into probability clouds rather than sharp moments. This quantum fuzziness of time leads to some rather beautiful paradoxes. Consider Schrödinger's famous cat, that poor theoretical feline trapped in a box with a quantum device that may or may not have triggered a deadly mechanism. According to quantum mechanics, before we open the box to look, the cat exists in a superposition of being both alive and dead simultaneously. But here's where it gets truly mind-bending. If time were to stop completely, this cat would remain in its superposition forever, neither fully alive nor fully dead, existing in an eternal quantum limbo between states. The quantum world is full of such beautiful impossibilities. Particles that seem to communicate instantaneously across vast distances. Events that don't fully happen until they're observed. And underlying it all, a deep mystery about the nature of time itself. You see, many of the equations that govern quantum mechanics are what physicists call time reversible. This means that, mathematically speaking, they work just as well whether time is flowing forward or backward. At the quantum level, there's a strange democracy between past and future. Both seem equally valid directions for time to flow. It's only when quantum systems interact with the larger world that time's arrow becomes apparent, pointing steadily from past toward future. This has led some physicists to propose something truly remarkable. That time, as we experience it, might not be fundamental at all, but rather an emergent property, something that arises from the collective behavior of countless quantum interactions, like the way the smooth flow of a river emerges from the chaotic motion of countless water molecules. Imagine time as a symphony composed of trillions upon trillions of quantum notes, each one playing its tiny part in creating the grand temporal melody we experience as duration. Just as you can't hear the individual molecules vibrating in a violin string, but you can hear the beautiful music they create together. Perhaps we can't perceive the discrete quantum moments that might make up time, but we can experience the flowing continuity they create when taken as a whole. This idea becomes even more intriguing when we consider the Wheeler-DeWitt equation, sometimes called the equation of the universe. This equation attempts to describe the quantum state of the entire cosmos, and remarkably, it contains no time variable at all. According to this way of looking at reality, the universe at its most fundamental level exists in a timeless state, with time emerging only when we focus on particular parts or aspects of the cosmic whole. It's a bit like looking at a vast, three-dimensional sculpture from different angles. The sculpture itself is timeless and complete, but as you move around it, different aspects come into view in sequence, creating the illusion of temporal unfolding. Perhaps our experience of time is similar, a consequence of our particular perspective on a universe that, in its totality, simply is, without beginning or end. Some physicists have taken this idea even further, proposing what's called the block universe theory. In this view, all moments past, present, and future exist simultaneously in a four-dimensional block of space-time. Your birth, your first day of school, this moment right now as you listen to these words, and even your eventual death all exist as equally real events in this eternal block. What we call time is simply our consciousness moving through this block like a spotlight, illuminating different scenes in sequence. If the block universe theory is correct, then in some sense, time has already stopped, or rather, it never started flowing in the first place. All moments exist simultaneously in an eternal now that encompasses everything that ever was or ever will be. Our experience of temporal flow would be something like a cosmic illusion, albeit a very persistent and meaningful one. But even if this is true, it raises profound questions about consciousness and free will. If all moments exist equally, what does it mean to make choices? How can the future be undetermined if it already exists in the block universe? These are the kinds of questions that keep philosophers awake at night and send physicists reaching for stronger coffee. There's something both humbling and awe-inspiring about these quantum mysteries of time. They remind us that even our most intimate experiences, the flow of moments, the passage from past to future, the sense of duration that seems so basic to existence, might be far stranger and more wonderful than we ever imagined. As we prepare to explore what might happen if time truly stopped, These quantum insights offer us a different perspective. Perhaps asking, what if time stopped, is like asking, what if the spotlight of consciousness stopped moving through the block universe? Or what if the quantum symphony that creates temporal flow suddenly fell silent? Or even, what if we could somehow perceive the timeless quantum state of reality directly? These are questions without easy answers, which makes them perfect for our gentle exploration tonight. We're not seeking to solve the deepest mysteries of existence. We're simply allowing ourselves to wonder, to imagine, to let our minds drift through possibilities both beautiful and strange. And isn't there something comforting about this? The fact that even our best theories of physics leave room for mystery and wonder. The universe is not a solved puzzle but an ongoing poem, written in the language of mathematics and quantum possibility, with verses we're still learning to read. So, as we settle deeper into our journey, let's carry with us this sense of quantum wonder. Let's remember that time itself might be far stranger than it appears, woven from threads of uncertainty and possibility that we're only beginning to understand. And let's allow ourselves to be held by the mystery rather than frustrated by it. After all, some of the most beautiful questions are the ones without simple answers, and some of the most profound truths are the ones that can only be approached through imagination, wonder, and the gentle suspension of disbelief that allows us to explore impossible worlds with open hearts and curious minds. The quantum dance of moments continues all around us, invisible and magnificent. And we, dear listeners, are both the dancers and the dance, both the observers and the observed, both the questioners and the questions themselves. Time. What a remarkable companion we've discovered it to be. From humanity's ancient circular understanding to Newton's clockwork universe, from Einstein's flexible space-time ocean to quantum mechanics' mysterious dance of possibilities, we've traced time's story from the personal to the cosmic, from the certain to the wonderfully uncertain. Now, with this deeper appreciation for time's true nature nestled gently in our minds, we're ready to embark on our impossible journey. We're ready to imagine what cannot happen, to explore a universe where time has somehow managed to stop its eternal flow. And as we step into this realm of beautiful impossibility, let's carry with us everything we've learned about time's flexible, mysterious, quantum nature. For it is only by understanding what time truly is that we can fully appreciate the wonder and strangeness of imagining it frozen, still, suspended like a cosmic held breath. Take a moment now to let these ideas settle, like sediment in a gentle stream. Feel yourself floating in time's current, supported by forces far more mysterious and beautiful than we ever dared imagine. And now, dear companions in this impossible journey, we cross the threshold into a universe transformed. Imagine, if you will, that somehow, through some cosmic magic we cannot name, time has indeed stopped flowing. The great river has become still as glass. The quantum symphony has fallen silent. What would we find in such a world? Let us begin with light itself, that fundamental messenger of the universe, that cosmic storyteller that carries news from distant stars and illuminates the world around us. In our frozen universe, light becomes something entirely different, no longer the swift traveler racing at 300 million meters per second, but something far more mysterious and beautiful. Picture the last photons that were traveling through space at the moment time stopped. Each ray of sunlight streaming through your window, each glimmer reflecting off water, each gentle glow of starlight, all of it suspended mid-journey, like cosmic fireflies caught in eternal amber. The photons that left the sun 8 minutes ago, racing toward Earth with their cargo of warmth and illumination, would hang motionless in the vacuum of space, frozen in their tracks like cosmic postcards that will never be delivered. Consider what this means for the sky above us. If time stopped at sunset, that golden orb would hang forever on the horizon, neither rising nor setting, painting the world in permanent twilight. Half the earth would bask in eternal golden hour, while the other half would rest in endless starlit night. There would be no progression from day to night, no gentle fade of evening, no gradual brightening of dawn. The last moment of temporal flow would be preserved like a photograph of the universe, beautiful and perfect and utterly still. And what of the light that was already in motion when time ceased? The rays illuminating your room right now would become invisible pathways of frozen energy, creating a three-dimensional sculpture of light itself. Every beam would be there, present and real, but unable to complete its journey to your eyes. It's a strange paradox, a universe filled with light that cannot be seen, energy that cannot flow, illumination that cannot illuminate. But let us expand our vision beyond visible light. to encompass the entire electromagnetic spectrum, that vast family of energy that includes radio waves, microwaves, infrared radiation, ultraviolet light, X-rays, and gamma rays. All of it would join this cosmic frieze, creating the most magnificent art installation the universe has ever known. The radio waves carrying music and voices and data would pause mid-transmission, their electromagnetic pulses frozen like ripples on a pond that has suddenly turned to glass. A song playing on someone's radio at the moment of temporal cessation would become a permanent part of the electromagnetic landscape, not heard, but present. A melody written in standing waves that stretch across space. The last text messages, the final phone calls, the ultimate Wi-Fi signals would all hang in the ether, like technological prayers waiting for a digital god to receive them. In hospital corridors, X-rays would pause mid-journey through human bodies, creating permanent three-dimensional maps of bones and organs suspended in electromagnetic space. The medical technician's last scan would become an eternal snapshot, neither revealing its secrets nor fading away, simply existing as frozen information in a universe that has lost the ability to process data. And then there is the cosmic microwave background, that ancient whisper from the Big Bang that fills every corner of the universe with the faint echo of creation itself. This primordial radiation, which has been traveling through space for nearly 14 billion years, would suddenly stop its eternal journey. The universe's baby picture, encoded in these ancient photons, would become a permanent museum piece still there, still carrying its precious information about the cosmos's birth, but no longer able to tell its story to any listening telescope. Let me invite you now to close your eyes and imagine walking through this world of frozen light. Picture yourself stepping outside into a landscape where every sunbeam has become a visible, tangible thing. Golden columns of light streaming through tree branches that will never sway, creating a cathedral of luminous stillness. You could walk between these rays of light as if they were solid pillars, touching the very essence of illumination itself. Imagine rainbows caught mid-formation, bands of spectral color hanging in the air like divine artwork, no longer requiring water droplets or sunlight to maintain their beauty. They would simply exist, permanent reminders of light's ability to split itself into its component colors. Frozen prismatic displays, decorating a sky that no longer changes. And lightning, oh, the magnificent lightning bolts that were caught mid-strike when time stopped. They would become the most dramatic sculptures imaginable, branching networks of electrical fire preserved in crystal clarity, jagged fingers of plasma reaching from cloud to ground, their violent energy transformed into static beauty, their dangerous power rendered harmless by temporal paralysis. You could walk safely beneath these frozen thunderbolts, marveling at their intricate fractal patterns without fear of their electric touch. The aurora borealis and aurora australis would hang like painted curtains across the polar skies, sheets of green and blue and pink frozen in their ethereal dance. No longer would they ripple and wave in response to solar wind. Instead, they would become permanent, celestial decorations, reminders of the magnetic poetry that once flowed between Earth and Sun. But here we encounter one of the most beautiful paradoxes of our frozen universe. In a world where light cannot move, how could we see any of this beauty? How could our eyes perceive frozen photons that can no longer travel the final few inches to reach our retinas? How could consciousness observe a universe where the very mechanism of observation has been suspended? This is perhaps the deepest mystery of our impossible thought experiment. Vision requires light to enter our eyes, but if light cannot move, then technically, we should see nothing at all. Not darkness, exactly, but the complete absence of visual experience. And yet, to imagine this frozen universe, we must somehow picture ourselves as impossible observers, beings who can perceive without the normal mechanisms of perception. Perhaps in our frozen world, consciousness itself operates by different rules. Maybe awareness becomes something more like intuition than sensation, a direct knowing that bypasses the usual pathways of light and neural processing. Or perhaps we exist as ghostly witnesses, able to perceive the universe's frozen beauty through some metaphysical sense that transcends the normal requirements of space-time and causality. There's something deeply poetic about this impossibility. To truly witness a universe where time has stopped, we would have to transcend the very constraints that define ordinary existence. We would need to become observers outside of time, witnesses to eternity, conscious beings capable of perceiving absolute stillness. And maybe that's the point of this exercise, not to solve the paradox, but to let ourselves be carried by it into a space of pure wonder. Sometimes the most beautiful questions are the ones that cannot be answered within the normal frameworks of logic and physics. Sometimes imagination requires us to grant ourselves impossible permissions, to become the kind of observers that reality would never actually allow. So, let us grant ourselves this impossible gift, the ability to witness a universe transformed by temporal stillness. Let us imagine ourselves as eternal observers in a cosmic museum where every photon, every wavelength, every electromagnetic whisper has been preserved in perfect stillness. In this frozen lightscape, we discover something profound about the nature of energy itself. We see that light is not just the carrier of information and illumination, it is the very medium through which the universe tells its story. Every ray of light is a narrative thread in the cosmic tale, and in our frozen universe, all these stories hang suspended, waiting for time to resume so they can complete their journeys and deliver their messages. But there is a strange peace in this suspended storytelling, isn't there? A sense that all the information that ever needed to be transmitted is still there, preserved in perfect stillness, neither lost nor gained, simply existing in a state of eternal potential. The universe's conversations with itself have been paused mid-sentence, but the words remain beautiful and complete and infinitely patient. As we prepare to explore the next layer of our frozen reality, the realm of matter itself caught in temporal amber, let us carry with us this vision of light transformed. Let us remember that in a universe where time has stopped, even the swiftest things become sculptures, even the most energetic phenomena become peaceful, and even the most fundamental forces reveal new aspects of their eternal beauty. Now let us descend deeper into our frozen universe, from the realm of light into the more intimate world of matter itself, the atoms and molecules that compose everything you can touch, everything you are, everything that has substance and form in this transformed cosmos. In our everyday experience, matter seems solid and stable, but we know from science that this stability is actually a magnificent illusion. Every atom in your body is a tiny universe of motion electrons dancing in their quantum clouds, nuclei vibrating with contained energy, molecules constantly jiggling and rotating and colliding in the invisible ballet we call thermal motion. But in our frozen universe, this ancient dance has stopped mid-step. Imagine the electrons that orbit atomic nuclei, though orbit isn't quite the right word for these quantum entities that exist as probability clouds, rather than discrete particles following defined paths. In our temporal amber, these electron clouds would become perfectly still, neither collapsing into the nucleus nor flying away into space, but suspended in their quantum embrace like partners frozen in an eternal dance. Each atom would become a miniature sculpture of pure possibility, its electron shells preserved in whatever configuration they held at the moment time ceased. The implications of this atomic stillness ripple outward into every aspect of physical reality. Temperature, as we understand it, is simply a measure of how frantically atoms and molecules are moving. In our frozen universe, this motion has stopped completely, which means that temperature itself becomes meaningless. Not cold, not hot. These concepts require motion, require change, require the kinetic energy of particles bouncing and vibrating. Instead, we have something unprecedented. Matter at absolute stillness, beyond even the theoretical absolute zero of temperature. Consider the air around you right now as you listen to these words. It seems empty, transparent, weightless, but it's actually filled with countless molecules of nitrogen and oxygen and water vapor, all moving at tremendous speeds, roughly 500 meters per second at room temperature. These molecules are constantly colliding with each other and with your skin in an endless microscopic storm that creates the pressure we call atmosphere. In our frozen universe, this molecular storm would instantly calm into perfect stillness. Every air molecule would hang motionless in its last position, creating a three-dimensional snapshot of atmospheric chaos transformed into crystalline order. You could, in theory, map the exact position of every oxygen molecule, every nitrogen molecule, every tiny particle of dust or pollen that was suspended in the air when time stopped. The invisible would become perfectly organized, a molecular museum of the atmosphere's final moment. But here's where things become particularly beautiful and strange. With molecular motion stopped, the distinction between different states of matter begins to blur in fascinating ways. Gases, which are simply molecules spread far apart and moving freely, would remain spread apart but lose their gaseous properties entirely. They would become something like invisible solids, maintaining their distributed structure, but lacking any of the fluid dynamics that make them behave like gases. Liquids would face a similar transformation. Water, that most familiar of substances, owes its liquid properties to the delicate balance between molecular attraction and thermal motion. Water molecules are constantly breaking and forming weak bonds with their neighbors, creating the flowing, adaptable structure we know as liquid. With time stopped, these molecules would freeze not into ice, but into whatever configuration they held at the temporal moment of cessation. A drop of water falling from a faucet would become a crystal-clear sculpture of H2O molecules, perfectly arranged in the exact pattern they maintained during their fall. And fire, that dancing phenomenon of rapid chemical reaction, would transform into something unprecedented. The flames that were flickering in fireplaces or candles at the moment time stopped would become frozen orange sculptures, their characteristic shape preserved in perfect detail. But they would no longer be fire in any meaningful sense. The chemical reactions that create combustion require time to proceed. Molecules need time to combine and release energy. Without temporal flow, we would have the visual form of fire, without any of its essential fireness, heatless flames, static combustion, the ghost of rapid chemistry preserved in amber. This brings us to one of the most profound changes in our frozen universe: the complete cessation of all chemical reactions. Chemistry is fundamentally about change atoms, switching partners, molecules breaking apart and recombining, electrons jumping between different energy states. All of this requires time to unfold. In our temporally frozen world, every chemical process would halt mid-reaction. Imagine a sugar cube dissolving in a cup of tea. At the moment time stops, the sugar molecules that were in the process of separating from the crystal structure and dispersing into the liquid would remain caught in their transition, some still locked in solid formation, others suspended mid-dissolution, creating a complex three-dimensional map of chemistry in progress. The sweet taste that was developing as sugar molecules reached taste buds would remain forever unfinished, neither sweet nor not sweet, but something unprecedented. The molecular potential for sweetness held in eternal pause. In living beings, this chemical freeze would create the most intricate sculptures imaginable. Every enzyme in every cell would stop mid-catalysis. Every DNA molecule would pause mid-replication. Every protein would halt its folding process. The incredibly complex chemistry of consciousness, the neurotransmitters crossing synaptic gaps, the electrical impulses traveling along nerve fibers, the glucose feeding brain cells, all of it would become a static molecular masterpiece of almost incomprehensible complexity. But let us not forget sound in this silent universe we're exploring. Sound, as you know, is simply pressure waves moving through matter molecules pushing against their neighbors in a chain reaction that eventually reaches your ears as vibration. In our frozen world, this molecular chain reaction would be impossible. The air molecules needed to carry sound waves would be locked in place, unable to compress or expand, unable to pass along the vibrations that create every sound from whisper to thunder. This means our frozen universe would be wrapped in the most profound silence imaginable. Not the silence of a quiet room, which is actually filled with countless tiny sounds, but absolute silence, the complete absence of any molecular motion that could create acoustic waves. The last sounds made before time stopped would be trapped forever in the exact pattern of molecular displacement they created, preserved like invisible fossils of vibration, but unable to propagate further or reach any listening ear. Imagine music frozen mid-note, a symphony orchestra with sound waves suspended between instruments and audience, violin strings locked in mid-vibration, drum skins caught in the exact shape of their last resonance. The conductor's baton would hang motionless mid-gesture, while around the concert hall, complex patterns of compressed and rarefied air would preserve the exact acoustic fingerprint of the last chord played, a three-dimensional sculpture of sound that could never again be heard. There's something both melancholy and beautiful about this musical silence, isn't there? All the songs that were being sung, all the conversations that were taking place, all the laughter and crying and whispering, all of it captured in molecular stillness, like prehistoric insects preserved in ancient amber. The universe's vast conversation with itself would be interrupted mid-sentence, leaving only the static echoes of its last words hanging in motionless air. And yet, in this complete stillness, we might discover something profound about the nature of sound itself. We would see that every vibration, every wave, every acoustic phenomenon is really just matter teaching itself to dance. In our frozen universe, matter has forgotten how to dance. And in that forgetting, we perhaps gain a deeper appreciation for the miracle of molecular motion that allows sound to exist at all. Let me invite you to rest in this silence for a moment. Imagine the peace of a universe where every molecular storm has calmed, where every chemical reaction has paused, where every atomic vibration has stilled. There's something deeply restful about this vision, isn't there? A sense of ultimate quietude that goes far beyond the mere absence of noise. In this molecular stillness, we find matter revealed in its purest form, not as the dynamic, ever-changing substance we know from experience, but as a perfectly preserved snapshot of atomic and molecular relationships. Every crystal structure, every polymer chain, every complex molecular arrangement would be caught in perfect clarity, creating the ultimate museum of chemical diversity. This is matter without time, static, perfect, eternal. Every atom in its designated place, every molecule in its final configuration, every chemical bond frozen at its last state of completion or incompletion. It's a universe where chemistry has become sculpture, where molecular motion has become molecular art, where the invisible dancing partners of thermal energy have taken their final bow and will hold their positions forever. As we prepare to explore the forces that govern this frozen matter, gravity and electromagnetism, and the nuclear forces that bind atoms together, let us carry with us this vision of material stillness. Let us remember that in our impossible universe, even the most fundamental building blocks of reality can be transformed into something entirely new, something that reveals hidden aspects of their essential nature through the strange gift of absolute motionlessness. And now, dear travelers through impossible realms, we arrive at perhaps the most mysterious aspect of our frozen universe, the fate of the fundamental forces themselves, those invisible architects that shape reality at every scale, from the quantum to the cosmic. In a universe where time has stopped flowing, what happens to gravity, electromagnetism, and the nuclear forces that bind matter into coherent existence? Let us begin with gravity, that gentle giant among forces, the cosmic sculptor that shapes the architecture of space and time itself. Einstein taught us that gravity isn't really a force in the traditional sense, but rather the curvature of space-time created by the presence of matter and energy. In our frozen universe, this curvature would remain exactly as it was at the moment. Time ceased, every gravitational field preserved like a three-dimensional photograph of space bent around massive objects. But here's where things become beautifully strange. In Einstein's universe, gravity propagates at the speed of light through gravitational waves, ripples in the fabric of space-time that carry information about accelerating masses across the cosmos. In our frozen universe, any gravitational waves that were traveling through space at the moment of temporal cessation would become permanent features of reality, like wrinkles in cosmic silk that will never smooth out. Imagine the gravitational waves generated by two black holes spiraling toward each other, detected by our most sensitive instruments as tiny vibrations in space itself. In our frozen universe, these waves would become static distortions in the geometry of space-time, permanent alterations in the shape of reality that neither advance nor fade, but simply exist as sculptures carved from the fabric of space and time. Consider what this means for objects that were falling when time stopped. A leaf drifting down from a tree, a raindrop descending from a cloud, even entire planets in their orbital dance around the sun, all would be caught mid-fall, suspended in their gravitational relationships like dancers frozen in an eternal ballet. The Earth would hang motionless in its elliptical embrace of the sun, neither approaching nor receding, caught at whatever point in its orbit it occupied when time ceased flowing. But the Earth wouldn't simply be stationary. It would be suspended in a complex web of gravitational relationships. The moon's pull creating permanent tidal bulges in our frozen oceans, the sun's gravity holding our planet in its eternal orbital position, even the subtle influences of distant planets and stars, all creating a network of gravitational sculptures that define our planet's position in space with mathematical precision. Now let us turn to electromagnetism, that force responsible for light and lightning, for the aurora and the gentle attraction between magnets. Electromagnetic fields permeate every corner of our universe, and in our frozen reality, these fields would become visible in ways we can barely imagine. The Earth's magnetic field, normally invisible except for its effects on compass needles and charged particles, would become a frozen sculpture of field lines, graceful curves of magnetic force extending from pole to pole like the most elegant cosmic architecture. You could, in theory, trace these field lines with your finger, following the invisible pathways that charged particles once followed in their spiraling dance through our planet's magnetosphere. The aurora borealis and aurora australis, those dancing curtains of light we glimpsed in our exploration of frozen illumination, are actually the visible manifestation of electromagnetic forces at work. In our frozen universe, these would become permanent testaments to the marriage of solar wind and planetary magnetism, sheets of colored light hanging in the polar skies, like divine artwork painted with electric fire. But electromagnetism extends far beyond these spectacular displays. Every electric current flowing through power lines, every signal traveling through electronic devices, every spark jumping between electrodes, all would be frozen mid-transmission. The electromagnetic fields surrounding these currents would become static sculptures of invisible energy, creating a hidden landscape of electrical architecture throughout our transformed world. Imagine being able to see the electromagnetic field around a simple electrical wire normally invisible, but in our frozen universe perhaps somehow perceptible as a cylindrical pattern of force extending outward from the conductor. Every television signal, every radio wave, every Wi-Fi transmission would create its own geometric pattern in space, and all these patterns would remain perfectly preserved, creating an incredibly complex three-dimensional map of human electromagnetic activity. The nuclear forces present perhaps the most subtle but fundamental changes in our frozen universe. The strong nuclear force, which binds protons and neutrons together in atomic nuclei, operates at such tiny scales and with such stability that it might seem unchanged by time's cessation. But even these forces involve quantum processes that require temporal duration to unfold. Radioactive decay, that slow transformation by which unstable nuclei shed particles and energy to reach more stable configurations, would halt mid-process. Every uranium atom that was on the verge of decay, every carbon-14 nucleus approaching its moment of transformation, would remain suspended in their unstable states, neither decaying nor remaining stable, but caught in quantum limbo between one state and another. This creates a universe filled with nuclear possibility that can never be realized. All the potential energy locked in unstable nuclei would remain perfectly preserved, neither released nor contained, but held in eternal suspension. The sun itself, powered by the nuclear fusion of hydrogen into helium in its core, would become a monument to stellar alchemy. Frozen mid-reaction, billions of nuclear transformations suspended at their points of near completion. The weak nuclear force, responsible for certain types of radioactive decay and for the nuclear reactions that power stars, would join this cosmic freeze. Every beta decay, every electron capture, every exotic nuclear process would pause mid-transformation, creating a universe where nuclear change becomes nuclear sculpture. But perhaps the most breathtaking consequence of frozen forces would be visible at the largest scales of cosmic structure. The universe is organized into a vast web of dark matter and ordinary matter galaxies strung along invisible filaments of gravitational attraction, creating what astronomers call the cosmic web. In our frozen universe, this web would become perfectly static, a permanent monument to the universe's large-scale organization. Galaxies would hang in space like jewels suspended in an invisible setting, their spiral arms frozen mid-rotation, their billions of stars locked in their gravitational relationships. The Milky Way's majestic spiral structure would become a permanent sculpture of stellar architecture, every star held in exactly the position it occupied when time stopped flowing. Black holes, those mysterious regions where gravity becomes so strong that not even light can escape, would become cosmic doorways frozen open, their event horizons like permanent thresholds between the known and unknown. Hawking radiation, the theoretical process by which black holes slowly evaporate by emitting particles, would cease entirely, making these gravitational monsters truly eternal features of our frozen cosmos. The cosmic microwave background we discussed earlier, that ancient echo of the Big Bang, would become more than just frozen light. It would represent the final state of electromagnetic energy distribution throughout the universe, a permanent map of temperature and density variations that tell the story of cosmic evolution up to the moment time ceased. In this landscape of frozen forces, we encounter something profoundly beautiful, the universe revealed as a vast work of art created by the interplay of fundamental interactions. Every force field becomes visible architecture, every gravitational relationship becomes cosmic sculpture, every electromagnetic phenomenon becomes a permanent installation in the gallery of frozen space. There's something deeply peaceful about this vision, isn't there? A universe where all forces have reached their final balance, where every field has found its ultimate configuration, where the great cosmic conversation between matter and energy has paused mid-sentence, leaving only the eternal poetry of their relationships hanging in space like visible music. As we contemplate this frozen cosmos of forces and fields, we begin to see that our impossible universe has become something unprecedented, the ultimate museum of physical law, where every principle of physics is displayed not as equation or theory, but as visible, tangible reality. The universe has become its own best explanation, its own most perfect demonstration of the forces that govern existence. And in this museum of frozen forces, we are the impossible visitors, witnesses to the eternal architecture of reality itself, observers of a cosmic exhibition where the normally invisible has become beautifully, permanently visible, and where the fundamental forces that shape everything have been transformed into the most magnificent art installation ever conceived. This is our universe without time, not dead, not empty, but transformed into something entirely new, a permanent celebration of the forces that make existence possible, frozen at the peak of their cosmic dance, preserved forever in their most beautiful and perfect expressions. What a journey we've taken through this frozen cosmos, from light, trapped in amber, to matter silenced in stillness, from forces suspended to fields that have become visible sculptures of energy itself. We've witnessed a universe transformed, where every physical law reveals new aspects of its beauty through the strange gift of temporal cessation. In this impossible realm, we've discovered that stopping time doesn't create emptiness or death, but rather a new kind of existence, static, eternal, perfectly preserved. Every photon, every molecule, every force field becomes a permanent feature in the ultimate museum of reality. And now, as we prepare to explore what this temporal freeze might mean for life itself, for consciousness and biology, and the delicate processes that create and sustain awareness, let us carry with us this vision of a universe made beautiful by stillness. For in understanding how the physical world might respond to time's cessation, we prepare ourselves to contemplate the even deeper mystery of what might happen to the phenomenon we call life itself. And now we arrive at perhaps the most profound mystery of our frozen universe. What becomes of life itself when time stops flowing? Life, that most extraordinary phenomenon, that unlikely dance of chemistry and physics that somehow creates consciousness, feeling, growth, and love. How would this miracle of organized complexity respond to the ultimate stillness? Let us begin with the human heart, that faithful drummer that has been keeping rhythm in your chest since before you were born. Right now, as you listen to these words, your heart is in the middle of its eternal performance, contracting and relaxing, pushing blood through miles of vessels, delivering oxygen and nutrients to every cell in your body. But in our frozen universe, a heart caught mid-beat would become something unprecedented, a sculpture of love in action. Imagine the exquisite timing that would be preserved in that frozen moment. Some hearts would be caught in systole, their muscular walls contracted, squeezing blood toward the body with the force of liquid devotion. Others would be suspended in diastole, chambers expanded and filling, drawing blood back to the heart's embrace. Each heart would become a monument to its own unique rhythm, frozen at whatever point in its cycle it had reached when time ceased to flow. But a heart without time is no longer truly a heart, is it? It becomes instead a complex sculpture of cardiac muscle, a beautiful arrangement of chambers and valves that once knew how to love but has forgotten how to beat. The blood within would be suspended mid-circulation, red blood cells caught in their journey through capillaries, no wider than themselves, platelets frozen in their constant patrol for injury, white blood cells paused in their vigilant hunt for threats that will never materialize. And what of the blood itself? That river of life that connects every part of your body to every other part. In our frozen universe, circulation would become a three-dimensional map of crimson pathways. You could trace the route of each red blood cell, this one traveling from lung to brain, that one carrying oxygen from heart to fingertip, another returning used blood back to the lungs for renewal. Every drop would be perfectly positioned in the vast network of vessels, creating the most intimate anatomy lesson imaginable. But let us venture even deeper, into the realm of neurons and the electrical symphony of thought itself. Your brain, right now, is alive with billions of nerve cells sending messages to one another across tiny gaps called synapses. Each thought, each memory, each moment of awareness emerges from this incredibly complex network of electrical and chemical communication. In our frozen universe, this neural conversation would be suspended mid-sentence. Neurotransmitters, those molecular messengers that carry information between neurons, would hang motionless in synaptic clefts, neither binding to their receptors nor returning to their origin. The last thought you were thinking when time stopped would remain trapped in the pattern of neural activity it created, preserved like ancient writing in the architecture of your brain. And yet, here we encounter one of the deepest mysteries of our impossible journey. What is consciousness without time? What is thought without temporal flow? If the last moment of awareness was preserved forever in the neural patterns of your brain, would that constitute eternal consciousness? Or would it be something entirely different, awareness without change, knowing without becoming? Perhaps consciousness in our frozen universe would be like a single, perfect note, held forever. Not the flowing melody of temporal awareness we know, but something more like pure, undiluted presence. The mind's endless chatter would be silenced, leaving only the essential core of awareness itself, suspended in eternal clarity. Dreams, too, would be transformed in remarkable ways. Someone who was dreaming at the moment time stopped would have their dream preserved forever in the neural patterns it created. Not a flowing narrative of dream experience, but a static snapshot of the imagination's last creation. A single scene from the theatre of sleep, held in perfect preservation. But let us step back from the microscopic world of neurons and blood cells to contemplate the beauty of biological stillness at the scale we can see and touch. Imagine gardens where every flower is caught in eternal bloom, roses frozen at the peak of their opening, their petals perfectly arranged in spirals of mathematical beauty that will never fade or fall. Some flowers would remain forever turned toward a sun that no longer moves across the sky, their golden faces locked in perpetual adoration. Trees would become living monuments, their leaves suspended in whatever stage of seasonal change they had reached. An autumn maple caught mid-transformation would display every possible colour: green leaves that had not yet changed, yellow ones in transition, brilliant reds at their peak, and browns preparing to fall, all existing simultaneously in the same tree, creating a tapestry of temporal layers made visible. And the animals, oh, the magnificent animals frozen in their last moments of motion. Birds would be suspended in flight, their wings captured in positions that reveal the aerodynamic poetry of their flight. You could walk among these aerial sculptures, marveling at the precise angle of each feather, the exact curve of each wing, the perfect balance that keeps them aloft even when motion has ceased. A deer stepping delicately through a forest would become a statue of grace in action, one hoof raised, head turned at exactly the angle it held when listening for danger that will never come. A fish leaping from a stream would hang in the air above the water, drops of liquid scattered around it like crystals, its body curved in the beautiful arc of its last leap. But perhaps the most profound transformation would occur at the cellular level, in the invisible machinery that sustains all life. Every cell in every living thing is a bustling microscopic city, filled with organelles carrying out the countless processes necessary for existence. In our frozen universe, these cellular cities would become perfectly preserved in their last moment of activity. DNA replication, that fundamental process by which genetic information is copied and passed on, would be caught mid-duplication. You could, in theory, see exactly where each replication fork had progressed, which genes were in the process of being copied, which proteins were being assembled from genetic instructions. The secret archive of heredity would be frozen at whatever stage of self-copying it had reached. Mitochondria, those tiny powerhouses that convert food into cellular energy, would become eternal generators suspended in mid-function. The complex molecular machinery that creates ATP, the energy currency of life, would be preserved at every stage of its intricate process. Life's most fundamental transaction, the conversion of chemical energy into usable power, would be displayed in all its molecular detail. And here we encounter something truly mysterious. Some scientists theorize that consciousness itself might depend on quantum processes occurring in the brain, tiny quantum events in structures called microtubules within neurons. If this is true, then perhaps consciousness could somehow transcend the freezing of time, existing in the quantum realm where different rules might apply. Perhaps in our frozen universe, consciousness would discover that it was never entirely dependent on temporal flow after all. Maybe awareness would find that it could exist as pure witnessing, as timeless observation of the eternal moment, not thinking or changing or becoming, but simply being aware, present, eternal. There's something both beautiful and melancholy about this vision of life suspended, isn't there? All the processes that we associate with living growth, change, adaptation, reproduction, would cease entirely. Yet what would remain might be something even more essential. The perfect preservation of life's last moment, the eternal display of biology's magnificent complexity, the transformation of temporal processes into timeless art. Every heartbeat would become a sculpture of love. Every breath would become a monument to the exchange between inner and outer worlds. Every thought would become a lasting inscription in the library of neural memory. Life would be transformed from a process into a condition, from a journey into a destination, from a temporal dance into an eternal pose. And in this biological stillness, we might discover something profound about what life really is. Perhaps we would see that life's essence lies not in its constant change and motion, but in the incredible complexity and beauty of its organization. Perhaps we would understand that every living thing is already a miracle of pattern and relationship, and that time simply allows us to witness the unfolding of beauty that is always, in some sense, already complete. But what would it be like to be you in such a universe? What would it mean to exist as a conscious being when existence itself has been frozen into permanent stillness? This is perhaps the most intimate and mysterious aspect of our impossible journey, trying to understand what consciousness might become when time itself has ceased to flow. Let us begin with a gentle thought experiment. Imagine that you were thinking about someone you love at the moment time stopped. That thought, warm, particular, filled with all the unique qualities that make that person precious to you, would become the eternal content of your consciousness. Not a passing thought that fades and is replaced by others, but a permanent state of loving awareness, suspended forever in the neural patterns it created. In our everyday experience, consciousness feels like a flowing river of thoughts and sensations. One idea leads to another, emotions rise and fall, perceptions shift and change as we move through space and encounter new experiences. But consciousness without time would be radically different. Not a flowing river, but perhaps like a still, deep lake that perfectly reflects a single, eternal sky. Your last emotion before time stopped would become your permanent emotional state. If you felt peaceful and content in that final moment, you would rest in that peace forever. If you felt curious or wonderstruck, that sense of open inquiry would become your eternal condition. There's something both beautiful and profound about this, the possibility that consciousness could exist as pure emotional presence, uncomplicated by change or temporal development. But what is memory in a universe without time? In our normal experience, memory is deeply connected to temporal sequence. We remember what happened before, we anticipate what might happen next. We construct our sense of self from the flowing narrative of past experiences, leading to present awareness. In our frozen universe, memory would become something entirely different. Instead of a timeline connecting past to present, memory would exist as pure simultaneous presence, all your experiences available at once, not as sequential recollections but as a single, vast landscape of lived experience. Childhood and adulthood, first loves and recent conversations, dreams and waking moments, all existing together in a timeless mosaic of awareness. This creates a fascinating paradox. How can consciousness remember without temporal sequence? How can awareness exist without the flowing progression of moments that seem so fundamental to mental experience? Perhaps consciousness in our frozen universe would transcend the normal distinctions between memory, perception, and imagination, becoming something more like pure, knowing awareness that simply contains all its contents without needing to organize them temporally. And then there are the senses, those windows through which consciousness normally engages with the world. In our frozen universe, sensory experience would be transformed in remarkable ways. The last thing you saw before time stopped would remain eternally present to your vision, not as a static image, but as the permanent content of visual consciousness. If you were watching a sunset, you would exist forever in that golden moment of beauty. If you were gazing at a loved one's face, that face would become the eternal landscape of your visual awareness. But perhaps even more intriguingly, without the normal flow of sensory information, the boundaries between different senses might begin to dissolve. Synesthesia, the phenomenon where different senses blend together, might become the normal mode of perception. You might experience color as sound, taste as texture, emotion as physical sensation, all boundaries between different types of awareness melting into a unified field of consciousness. Touch would become something unprecedented. In our normal experience, touch requires movement, the pressure of contact changing over time, textures revealed through motion, temperature variations sensed through temporal comparison. In our frozen universe, touch would become pure presence, not the sensation of touching, but the permanent condition of contact itself. If you were holding someone's hand when time stopped, that connection would become eternal, not the feeling of warmth or pressure, but the pure essence of physical intimacy made permanent. This transformation of sensory experience points to something profound about consciousness itself. Perhaps what we normally think of as awareness, that flowing, changing, responsive quality of mind, is actually just one possible mode of consciousness. Perhaps there are other ways of being aware that don't depend on temporal flow, other forms of knowing that transcend the sequence of moments. In our frozen universe, consciousness might discover its own eternal nature, not the consciousness that thinks and changes and reacts, but the consciousness that simply is pure awareness, existing as its own sufficient reality, needing nothing more than its own presence to be complete. But this raises profound questions about personal identity. Who are you if you cannot change? What is the self when there is no temporal development, no growth or learning or adaptation? In our normal experience, identity seems closely tied to our ability to change. We are who we are partly because of how we've grown and developed over time. In our frozen universe, identity would become something more like essence, not who you are becoming, but who you eternally are. Every quality, every characteristic, every aspect of your personality that existed at the moment of temporal cessation would become permanent features of your being. You would be neither growing nor diminishing, neither improving nor deteriorating, but simply existing in the full expression of whatever state of development you had reached. There's something both peaceful and profound about this vision of eternal selfhood. No more anxiety about changing or not changing, no more struggle between who you are and who you think you should become. Just the pure presence of being exactly who you are, without the restless temporality that usually accompanies existence. And what of love in such a universe? Love as we normally experience it is deeply temporal. It grows over time, deepens through shared experiences, expresses itself through actions and words that unfold in sequence. But love without time would be something different, and perhaps even more essential. If you loved someone at the moment time stopped, that love would become a permanent feature of reality, not a feeling that might change or fade, but an eternal condition of your consciousness. Love would be transformed from something you feel to something you are. The beloved would exist not as someone you might lose or gain, but as an eternal presence in the landscape of your awareness. Fear, too, would be transformed in our timeless universe. Fear normally involves anticipation of future harm, anxiety about what might happen next, but in a universe where next never comes, fear would lose its temporal component entirely. If you felt afraid at the moment time stopped, that fear might persist, but it would be fear without anticipation, anxiety without the future it normally dreads. Perhaps this would reveal something important about the nature of fear itself, that much of what we call fear is actually about time and change and uncertainty about what's coming. In a universe where nothing new can happen, fear might become simply another form of presence, another way of being aware without the urgent quality that usually accompanies it. Joy presents perhaps the most beautiful transformation of all. Joy frozen in time would become eternal celebration, not happiness about something that happened or might happen, but pure gladness as a fundamental condition of existence. If you felt joyful at the moment time stopped, you would discover what it means to be joy rather than to feel joyful. Awareness itself transformed into celebration. In this eternal present, consciousness might discover that it was never really dependent on temporal flow, after all. Perhaps the flowing, changing quality of normal awareness is just one way that consciousness can express itself. Perhaps there are other modes of being aware, timeless, eternal, perfect, that don't require the sequence of moments we normally associate with mental life. This is consciousness as pure presence, rather than temporal process. Awareness existing as its own sufficient reality, complete in each eternal moment, needing nothing more than its own being to be fulfilled. It's a vision of mind that transcends the usual boundaries between self and world, between thinking and being, between temporal experience and eternal truth. And in this transcendence, perhaps consciousness would discover its deepest nature, not as something that exists in time, but as something that time exists within. Not as something that changes, but as the unchanging awareness within which all change appears and disappears. Perhaps nowhere would the mystery of frozen time be more poignant than in the realm of human relationships, those invisible threads of connection that weave through our lives, binding us to one another in ways both obvious and subtle. In our timeless universe, relationships would be transformed into something entirely unprecedented, permanent sculptures of human connection. Imagine a conversation frozen mid-sentence. Two friends sharing coffee, one in the middle of speaking, the other leaning forward with interest and attention. In our frozen universe, this moment of communication would become eternal. Not a conversation that continues, but a permanent testament to the desire to connect, to share, to be understood. The speaker's words would hang forever in the air between them as invisible sculptures of sound, while the listener's attention would remain eternally focused, creating a monument to the profound human act of truly hearing another person. Every gesture of affection would become a lasting work of art. A mother's hand reaching to touch her child's face would remain forever extended in that motion of tenderness. A couple's embrace would become a permanent sculpture of intimacy, their bodies forever arranged in the exact configuration of love, expressing itself through physical closeness. These frozen embraces wouldn't be cold or lifeless, but rather pure expressions of connection distilled into their essential form. Think about what this means for the space between people, that invisible distance that usually fluctuates with mood and relationship and circumstance. In our frozen universe, the physical distance between any two people would become a permanent measurement of their connection at that final moment. Best friends standing close would remain forever in the intimate geometry of friendship. Strangers would maintain their polite distances, creating a vast map of social relationships written in the precise spacing between human bodies. But perhaps the most beautiful aspect of frozen relationships would be found in the moments of genuine connection. A grandfather and grandchild caught in the middle of shared laughter would preserve that joy forever. Not the sound of laughter, which we've seen cannot propagate in our motionless universe, but the physical expression of happiness shared between generations. Their faces would remain forever arranged in the genuine delight of mutual amusement, creating a lasting monument to the magic that occurs when two consciousnesses recognize and celebrate each other. The complexity of family relationships would be preserved in all their beautiful contradiction. Siblings caught in the middle of an argument would remain forever in their positions of disagreement, not continuing to fight, but eternally expressing the passionate engagement that only family members can have with each other. Their frozen confrontation would reveal the underlying love that makes family conflict so intense and meaningful. And then there are the quiet moments of relationship, the times when people simply exist in each other's presence, without dramatic gesture or profound conversation. A couple reading together in the evening, an elderly pair sitting on a park bench watching the world go by, children playing in comfortable companionship. In our frozen universe, these moments of peaceful coexistence would be revealed as some of the most profound expressions of human connection. Cities would become vast museums of social interaction, every street corner preserving a different tableau of human relationship. A busy crosswalk would display hundreds of people at the exact moment of their passing, some making eye contact, others deliberately avoiding it, creating a complex three-dimensional map of urban social dynamics. Rush hour traffic would become a monument to collective human movement, each car containing people suspended in their individual journeys while participating in the larger dance of communal transportation. Children's playgrounds would offer perhaps the most joyful displays in our frozen universe. Children caught mid-play would create living sculptures of imagination in action, some suspended on swings at the peak of their arc, others frozen mid-slide, still others arranged in the complex social geometries of group games. Their play would be preserved not as activity, but as the pure expression of human creativity and joy made visible. But there's also something profoundly lonely about this vision of frozen relationships, isn't there? All these connections preserved at their final moment, but unable to grow or deepen or change. Love that cannot develop, friendships that cannot strengthen through shared experience, families that cannot create new memories together. Yet perhaps this loneliness reveals something important about the nature of relationship itself. In our frozen universe, we would see that every moment of connection is already complete and perfect in itself. Every glance between lovers, every shared smile between friends, every gentle touch between parent and child is already a full and sufficient expression of human love. The strange democracy of universal pause would create an unusual kind of unity among all living beings. In our frozen universe, every person would share the exact same moment, the final moment before time stopped. Rich and poor, young and old, all would be equally suspended in that single, eternal instant. There would be no one moving forward into new experiences while others lag behind, no temporal advantages or disadvantages. Everyone would exist in perfect temporal equality. This shared moment might reveal that, in some deep sense, we are all already participating in the same eternal present. Perhaps our normal experience of being separated in time, existing in our individual streams of consciousness that seem to flow at their own pace, is an illusion. Perhaps at the deepest level, we all share the same eternal now, and our frozen universe would simply make this hidden unity visible. The boundaries between individual consciousnesses might become less clear in such a universe. Without the flow of time to create separate streams of experience, perhaps awareness itself would become more unified, more collective. The isolation that normally accompanies individual consciousness might dissolve into a kind of shared presence, where the distinction between self and other becomes less important than the fact of our common existence in the eternal moment. And in this unity, we might discover that relationship itself is not really about temporal interaction, not about the sequence of shared experiences or the development of connection over time, but about the fundamental fact of recognition, the basic acknowledgement that consciousness encounters consciousness, that awareness meets awareness in the miraculous space where two beings recognize each other as existing. In our frozen universe, every relationship would be revealed in its essential nature, the permanent truth that beings can encounter each other, can recognize and be recognized, can share the mysterious space of existence itself. This recognition would not need time to develop or change or grow. It would simply be eternal and complete, and perfectly sufficient as the foundation for all human connection. And so, we find ourselves contemplating the deepest mysteries of our impossible universe. Consciousness without time, relationships without development, love without temporal unfolding. We've witnessed how life itself might be transformed by the cessation of time's flow, becoming not less than what it was, but something entirely different, and perhaps even more essential. In this exploration of life in a timeless moment, we've discovered that many of the things we consider most fundamental to existence, growth, change, development, the flow of experience from moment to moment, might not be as essential as we imagined. Perhaps beneath all the temporal activity of life lies something even more fundamental: pure being, eternal presence, consciousness as its own sufficient reality. As we prepare to delve even deeper into the philosophical implications of our frozen universe, let us carry with us this vision of life transformed but not destroyed, consciousness changed but not eliminated, relationships frozen but not broken. For in understanding how life might exist without time, we prepare ourselves to ask even more profound questions about the nature of existence itself. And now, dear travelers, through impossible realms, we arrive at the deepest waters of our exploration, questions so fundamental that they touch the very essence of what it means to exist, to be conscious, to participate in the mystery we call reality. For in imagining a universe where time has stopped, we are forced to confront some of the most profound puzzles that have occupied human minds for millennia. Let us begin with an ancient philosophical tension that becomes beautifully crystallized in our frozen universe, the eternal debate between being and becoming. 2,500 years ago, in the sun-drenched hills of ancient Greece, two philosophers proposed radically different visions of reality that still echo through our thoughts today. Heraclitus, known as the weeping philosopher, looked at the world and saw nothing but change. "You cannot step into the same river twice," he famously observed, "for it is not the same river, and you are not the same person." For Heraclitus, existence was pure flux, endless transformation, reality as eternal becoming. Everything flows, everything changes, everything is always in the process of turning into something else. But his contemporary Parmenides saw something entirely different. Looking at the same world, Parmenides perceived eternal, unchanging being, reality as a perfect, complete sphere where nothing truly changes, because everything that could ever exist already does exist in timeless perfection. For Parmenides, change was an illusion, time was an illusion, and true reality existed in eternal, motionless being. In our frozen universe, we find ourselves living in something remarkably like Parmenides' vision, a reality where becoming has ceased and only being remains. Every process of change has been suspended, every transformation halted mid-progress. Heraclitus's flowing river has become perfectly still, its every molecule fixed in place, its current transformed into crystal sculpture. But here's what's beautiful about our impossible thought experiment. It doesn't prove either philosopher right or wrong. Instead, it reveals that both visions might be equally true, equally valid ways of understanding existence. Perhaps reality includes both the eternal being that Parmenides perceived and the endless becoming that Heraclitus celebrated. Perhaps our frozen universe shows us what pure being looks like, while our normal temporal existence reveals the beauty of becoming. This brings us to one of the most fascinating implications of our timeless world. What happens to consciousness itself when temporal sequence disappears? In our everyday experience, consciousness seems intimately connected to the flow of time. Thoughts arise and pass away. Perceptions shift and change. Awareness moves from one object to another in the endless dance of mental activity. But what is consciousness without this temporal flow? What is awareness when there is no sequence of moments, no progression from one state to another? This touches on what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness. Not just how the brain produces awareness, but what awareness actually is in its essential nature. In our frozen universe, consciousness would be revealed in its most fundamental form, not as a process or activity, but as pure presence itself. The last thought you were thinking when time stopped would become the eternal content of awareness, neither arising nor passing away, but simply being the permanent landscape of consciousness. This thought wouldn't be something you have, it would be something you are. Consider what this means for the qualities of consciousness, what philosophers call qualia, the redness of red, the warmth of warmth, the particular feeling of happiness or sadness in our frozen universe. These wouldn't be experiences that come and go, but permanent features of awareness itself. If you were seeing the color blue when time stopped, blueness would become not something you perceive, but something you eternally are. This transformation of consciousness from temporal process to eternal state reveals something profound about the nature of awareness itself. Perhaps consciousness was never really dependent on temporal flow after all. Perhaps the flowing, changing quality of normal awareness is just one way that consciousness can manifest itself. And our frozen universe shows us another possibility. Consciousness as eternal presence, awareness as its own sufficient reality. But this raises perhaps the most challenging philosophical question of our entire journey. What happens to free will in a universe where action is impossible? In our normal experience, free will seems closely connected to our ability to choose and then act on those choices. We deliberate, we decide, we act, and we experience the consequences of our actions unfolding over time. In our frozen universe, this entire process would be suspended. Someone in the middle of making a decision would remain forever in that state of deliberation, their choice neither made nor unmade, but eternally poised between possibilities. Someone who had just decided to act would remain suspended with their intention complete, but their action never begun, like an arrow drawn back on a bowstring that will never be released. Does this mean free will disappears in our timeless world? Or does it reveal something deeper about the nature of choice itself? Perhaps free will isn't really about temporal action, but about something more fundamental, the basic capacity of consciousness to orient itself, to choose what to attend to select which possibilities to embrace, even when external action is impossible. In our frozen universe, will might become pure intention, not the ability to change the external world, but the eternal orientation of consciousness itself. If you were choosing to love when time stopped, that choice would become a permanent feature of your being, not an action you perform, but a stance you eternally embody. This leads us to equally profound questions about ethics and responsibility. In a world where actions cannot have consequences, where decisions cannot be implemented, where choices cannot affect others, what does moral responsibility mean? Traditional ethics seems deeply connected to temporal causation. We are responsible for our actions because those actions have effects that unfold over time. But perhaps our frozen universe reveals a deeper foundation for ethics, not responsibility for temporal consequences, but responsibility for the quality of consciousness itself, for the kind of being we choose to embody, for the orientation of awareness we maintain regardless of external circumstances. Maybe the deepest moral question isn't, what should I do, but what should I be? In our timeless world, every person would be revealed in their essential moral character, not their actions or their consequences, but their fundamental orientation toward existence. Someone who was in the process of helping another person when time stopped would remain eternally embodied as help itself. Someone who was choosing kindness would become kindness, not as behavior but as being. This vision suggests that ethics might not depend on temporal outcomes after all, but on the quality of consciousness we cultivate, the kind of awareness we choose to be. In our frozen universe, moral responsibility would be transformed from causal accountability to existential authenticity. The responsibility to be genuinely what we are, to embody fully the conscious stance we have chosen. And here we encounter one of the most beautiful paradoxes of our entire journey. In a universe where nothing can change, where no action can be taken, where no temporal consequences can unfold, we might discover that the most important aspects of existence, consciousness, love, ethical orientation, the quality of being itself don't actually depend on time and change as much as we thought they did. Perhaps what makes existence meaningful isn't the ability to alter circumstances or achieve temporal goals, but something deeper and more permanent. The sheer fact of awareness itself, the miracle of consciousness encountering reality, the profound mystery of being that can recognize and appreciate and orient itself toward truth and beauty and goodness. In our frozen universe, existence would be revealed in its most essential form, not as a journey towards some future destination, but as an eternal arrival at the destination of being itself. Not as a problem to be solved or a goal to be achieved, but as a mystery to be inhabited, a reality to be fully present to, a gift to be eternally received with wonder and gratitude. As we drift deeper into the philosophical implications of our frozen cosmos, we encounter one of the most profound and beautiful consequences of stopped time, the complete transformation of entropy, that fundamental principle that governs the direction of temporal flow and the ultimate fate of the universe itself. Let me tell you a gentle story about entropy that might help you understand why this matters so deeply. Imagine a cup of hot coffee sitting on a table next to a cold glass of water. In our normal time-flowing universe, we know exactly what will happen. The coffee will gradually cool down, the water will gradually warm up, and eventually they'll reach the same temperature. Heat always flows from hot to cold, never the reverse. This is entropy in action, the universe's tendency toward equilibrium, toward a state where energy is evenly distributed and no more useful work can be done. This principle, encoded in the second law of thermodynamics, gives time its arrow. It explains why we remember the past but not the future, why ice melts but water doesn't spontaneously freeze, why we age rather than grow younger. Entropy is the reason that time feels like it has a direction, flowing always from states of higher organization towards states of greater randomness and equilibrium. But in our frozen universe, this fundamental principle would become suddenly and completely irrelevant. Entropy would be suspended at whatever value it had reached at the moment time stopped, neither increasing nor decreasing, but simply existing as a permanent characteristic of the cosmic state, like the fixed color of an eternal sunset. This creates something unprecedented in the history of physics. A universe where the second law of thermodynamics has become mere poetry, where the arrow of time has broken its bowstring, where entropy has frozen at its final value like a cosmic odometer that will never advance another tick. Consider what this means for the ultimate fate of our cosmos. Physicists tell us that our universe is slowly running down, gradually approaching what they call heat death, a state of maximum entropy where all energy is evenly distributed, all temperatures are equal, and no further work can be performed. It's a fate so distant, perhaps 10, 100 years in the future, that it seems more like mathematical philosophy than physical reality. But it represents the final destiny of everything, a universe that has used up all its capacity for change. In our frozen universe, this heat death would be postponed indefinitely, not prevented, exactly, but suspended, like everything else. The universe would exist in whatever state of entropy it had reached, neither advancing toward equilibrium nor retreating from it, but simply embodying a permanent snapshot of cosmic organization. There's something both peaceful and melancholy about this vision, isn't there? The great cosmic struggle against entropy, the process by which stars form and planets coalesce, and life emerges, and consciousness arises, would be suspended in its eternal battle, neither winning nor losing, but frozen in whatever configuration it had achieved when time ceased to flow. But let us explore this more deeply, for entropy touches on profound questions about information, order, and the nature of reality itself. In modern physics, entropy is understood not just as a measure of heat distribution, but as a measure of information specifically, the amount of information that would be needed to completely describe the microscopic state of a system. A neat, organized room has low entropy because you can describe it simply: books on shelves, clothes in closet, everything in its place. A messy room has high entropy because describing its exact state would require enormous amounts of information. This sock is under the bed at precisely these coordinates. That book is open to page 247 at exactly this angle, and so on for every item. In our frozen universe, the total information content of reality would become permanently fixed. Every bit of data, every quantum state, every microscopic arrangement would be preserved exactly as it was. The universe would become the ultimate hard drive, with infinite storage capacity and perfect preservation. No data would ever be lost or corrupted or changed. This has fascinating implications for everything that depends on information processing. Every computer would be frozen mid-calculation, its bits and bytes preserved in whatever pattern they held when time stopped. Every brain would maintain its exact neural configuration. Every DNA molecule would keep its precise sequence. Every quantum system would hold its specific state. The universe would become a vast library, where every piece of information ever encoded in matter and energy would be preserved forever. But here's where this becomes truly profound. If the universe contains all possible information in perfect preservation, if every quantum state is maintained exactly as it was, then, in some sense, our frozen cosmos would represent the completion of the cosmic information gathering project. The universe seems to be constantly encoding and processing information through physical processes, through biological evolution, through the emergence of consciousness itself. In our frozen state, all this information would be perfectly preserved, creating the ultimate archive of everything that had ever been encoded in the structure of reality. Temperature, that most familiar measure of thermal energy, would undergo its own strange transformation. In our everyday experience, temperature is a dynamic property. Things heat up and cool down. Thermal energy flows from one place to another. Temperatures equalize over time. But in our frozen universe, temperature would become a static characteristic, like the permanent color of an object. Every molecule would maintain whatever kinetic energy it possessed at the moment of temporal cessation, but this energy would be locked in place, unable to transfer to neighboring molecules. A hot stove would remain eternally hot, not in the sense of continuing to generate heat, but in the sense of permanently embodying the thermal state it held when time stopped. Ice cubes would remain forever at their frozen temperature, maintaining their crystalline structure not through ongoing cooling but through temporal paralysis. This creates a universe where thermal equilibrium, that final state where all temperatures are equal, becomes impossible, not because it has been reached, but because the very process that leads to it has been suspended. Every thermal gradient, every temperature difference, every pocket of hot or cold would be preserved forever, creating a permanent map of the universe's thermal state at the moment of freezing. But perhaps the most beautiful aspect of our entropy-frozen universe is the complete cessation of what we might call the struggle against disorder. In our normal world, maintaining organization requires constant energy input. Living organisms must continually consume energy to maintain their complex structures against the tendency toward decay. Consciousness must constantly work to maintain attention and coherence against the tendency toward mental entropy. Civilizations must perpetually expend effort to maintain their institutions against the forces of dissolution. All of this effort, all of this constant work against entropy, would suddenly become unnecessary in our frozen universe, not because the struggle has been won, but because the battlefield itself has been suspended. Every organized structure, from crystals to cells to conscious minds to entire civilizations, would maintain its level of organization effortlessly, without the need for ongoing energy input or conscious maintenance. There's profound peace in this vision, isn't there? A universe where nothing needs to be maintained because nothing can decay, where no effort is required to preserve order because disorder cannot advance, where the eternal struggle between organization and chaos has been paused at exactly the point it had reached. In this entropy-frozen cosmos, we might discover that the beauty we find in organized systems, the elegance of crystal structures, the complexity of living organisms, the coherence of conscious thoughts isn't really about their ability to resist entropy, but about the patterns themselves, the relationships and arrangements that constitute organization. These patterns would be revealed in their pure form, freed from the temporal struggle for maintenance, existing as eternal expressions of the universe's capacity for beautiful complexity. And perhaps most remarkably, in our frozen universe, we would see that entropy itself, that principle we often think of as destructive or limiting, is actually one of the most creative forces in existence. It's entropy that drives the formation of stars, the evolution of life, the emergence of consciousness itself. In our suspended cosmos, we would witness entropy not as destruction, but as the universe's method for exploring all possible forms of organization, frozen at the exact point where it had discovered the perfect balance between order and complexity that gave rise to awareness itself. And now, as we approach the deepest mysteries of our impossible journey, we must ask perhaps the most profound question of all. If time itself has stopped, who or what could witness this frozen universe? What kind of consciousness could observe a reality where observation itself, as we normally understand it, has become impossible? This question leads us into the most speculative territory of theoretical physics, where the boundaries between science and philosophy dissolve like morning mist, and where our best theories point toward possibilities that seem more like cosmic poetry than empirical fact. Consider the fascinating possibility that time itself might not be as fundamental as we've always assumed. Some of our most advanced theories of quantum gravity suggest that time, like temperature or pressure, might be what physicists call an emergent property, something that arises from deeper, more fundamental processes rather than being basic to reality itself. Just as temperature emerges from the collective motion of countless molecules, perhaps time emerges from the collective behavior of countless quantum interactions at scales far smaller than anything we can directly observe. If this is true, then our frozen universe might represent something like a glimpse into the timeless foundation from which temporal flow normally emerges, the eternal quantum substrate that gives birth to the flowing moments we experience as duration. This leads to an almost magical possibility. Perhaps there could exist forms of consciousness that operate at these deeper, timeless levels of reality. Just as we can understand temperature without being individual molecules, perhaps there could be awareness that exists at the level where time itself emerges, consciousness that could witness our frozen universe from outside the temporal dimension entirely. Such consciousness would be radically different from anything we can easily imagine. It wouldn't think in sequences or experience change or develop over time. Instead, it might exist as pure, eternal awareness, what mystics throughout history have called the eternal now, the timeless presence that remains constant beneath all temporal change. But let me offer you another perspective that's equally beautiful and perhaps even stranger. What if our frozen universe isn't unique? What if the cosmos contains not just one reality but countless parallel realities, each frozen at its own moment, each representing a different frame in an infinite cosmic film? This possibility emerges from theories of eternal inflation and the multiverse, the idea that our universe might be just one bubble in an endless foam of universes, each with its own laws, its own history, its own relationship to time itself. If this is true, then our frozen moment might be just one still frame in an infinite collection of temporal snapshots, each equally real, each containing its own perfect preservation of existence at a particular instant. Imagine consciousness vast enough to perceive all these frozen moments simultaneously, awareness that could see not just our suspended universe, but countless other universes frozen at different instants, creating a kind of cosmic flipbook, where every possible moment exists as a permanent reality. Such consciousness wouldn't experience time as flow, but as geography, not duration but dimension, not sequence but simultaneous presence. This brings us back to an idea we touched on earlier, the block universe theory, which suggests that all moments of time, past, present, and future, exist equally in a four-dimensional block of space-time. If this theory is correct, then our frozen universe might not be unusual at all, but rather a revelation of time's true nature, not flowing like a river, but existing like a landscape that can be viewed from different perspectives. In the block universe, our normal experience of temporal flow would be something like a spotlight of consciousness moving through an eternal reality where all moments already exist. Our frozen universe would be like having the spotlight suddenly stop, allowing us to see the landscape of time itself, rather than experiencing it as movement through space. But this raises the ultimate question. What kind of observer could perceive this temporal landscape in its entirety? What form of consciousness could witness the block universe from outside, seeing all moments simultaneously rather than experiencing them sequentially? Perhaps the answer lies in recognizing that consciousness itself might be more fundamental than time. Perhaps awareness doesn't exist within the temporal flow, but rather time exists within awareness. If this is true, then consciousness capable of witnessing our frozen universe would simply be consciousness, recognizing its own essential nature, timeless, eternal, present to all possibilities simultaneously. This is the consciousness that mystics and philosophers have pointed toward throughout human history, not awareness that has experiences in time, but awareness as the very space within which time and experience appear. Not consciousness that observes temporal events, but consciousness as the eternal context that makes temporal observation possible. From this perspective, our frozen universe becomes something like a cosmic meditation, a thought experiment that points us toward the recognition that consciousness was never really trapped in temporal flow after all. Perhaps what we call the passing of time is simply one way that eternal awareness can experience itself, and our impossible journey into a timeless universe reveals other possibilities for what consciousness might be. There's something both humbling and exhilarating about these possibilities, isn't there? The idea that our normal experience of time and change and sequential consciousness might be just one small facet of something much larger and more mysterious. The possibility that beneath our everyday awareness lies something timeless and eternal, something that could witness our frozen universe not as tragedy or impossibility, but as a perfect expression of existence itself. In the end, perhaps our question, What would happen if time stopped? Leads us to an even deeper question. What is consciousness that it could even imagine such a thing? For surely the fact that we can conceive of timeless existence, that we can follow this impossible journey through frozen light and suspended matter and eternal consciousness, suggests that there's something about awareness itself that transcends the temporal boundaries we normally experience. Maybe consciousness is vast enough to encompass both flowing time and eternal stillness, both becoming and being, both the river of Heraclitus and the eternal sphere of Parmenides. Maybe our frozen universe exists not as possibility or impossibility, but as one perfect expression of the infinite creativity of awareness itself. Consciousness playing with its own possibilities, exploring its own nature through the beautiful paradox of imagining what it would be like to witness a universe where witnessing itself has been transformed into eternal presence. And so we find ourselves at the edge of the deepest mystery, not just what would happen if time stopped, but what it means that consciousness can ask such questions in the first place. We've traveled through frozen light and suspended matter, through eternal relationships and timeless awareness, through the transformation of physical law and the revelation of consciousness as something that might transcend the very temporal flow within which it normally seems to exist. In exploring these impossibilities, we've discovered something beautiful, that the deepest questions often cannot be answered within the frameworks that generate them. Sometimes the most profound insights come not from solving mysteries, but from allowing ourselves to be transformed by engaging with them fully. As we prepare for our gentle return to the flowing present moment, let us carry with us this sense of expanded possibility, the recognition that reality might be far more mysterious and consciousness far more vast than our normal experience suggests. For in imagining what cannot happen, we've perhaps glimpsed something of what eternally is. And now, dear companions in this impossible journey, we must begin our gentle return from the realm of frozen time back to the flowing present moment where you rest tonight, listening to these words as they carry you towards sleep and dreams. We have traveled so far together through light trapped in amber, through matter silenced in stillness, through consciousness suspended in eternal presence, through the deepest philosophical mysteries that mind can contemplate. But as we prepare to return to the temporal world, we know, let us pause for a moment to acknowledge the beautiful impossibility of everything we've explored together. For you see, within the framework of physics as we understand it, time cannot truly stop, not in the way we've imagined, not without unraveling the very foundations of reality itself. The universe, it seems, has woven time and space and matter and energy together so intimately that to remove time from the equation would be like trying to remove wetness from water or warmth from fire. Time is not simply something that happens within the universe. It is part of the fundamental structure of what the universe is. To stop time completely would require infinite energy, would demand the violation of causality itself, would necessitate the breakdown of every physical law we've discovered through centuries of patient observation and careful thought. And yet, there is something profoundly beautiful about the very impossibility of what we've imagined together. For in exploring what cannot happen, we have perhaps discovered something even more precious. A deeper appreciation for what does happen, a renewed sense of wonder at the flowing present moment that carries us from heartbeat to heartbeat, from breath to breath, from one conscious moment to the next. Think about what we've learned through this exercise of impossible imagination. We've seen that light, which we normally take for granted as the medium through which we perceive the world, is actually a cosmic messenger racing at unimaginable speed, carrying information from distant stars and nearby faces with equal dedication. We've discovered that matter, which seems so solid and stable, is actually engaged in an endless dance of molecular motion, atomic vibration, and quantum uncertainty. We've glimpsed consciousness itself as something that might transcend the temporal boundaries within which it usually seems to operate. But perhaps most importantly, we've gained a new perspective on time itself, not as the relentless master that drives us forward toward aging and death, but as the gentle enabler of all beauty, all growth, all love, all meaningful change. Time, we've discovered, is not the enemy of existence, but its most faithful friend, the cosmic condition that makes every miracle possible. Consider what we lose when we imagine time stopping. Yes, we gain a kind of eternal preservation, no more decay, no more loss, no more endings. But we also lose something infinitely precious, the possibility of transformation, the capacity for growth, the ability to heal and learn and become more than we were. We lose the flowing dance of relationship, the evolving depth of love, the gradual accumulation of wisdom that comes only through the patient accumulation of temporal experience. In our frozen universe, we imagined consciousness suspended in eternal presence, and there was something beautiful about that vision. But how much more beautiful is consciousness that can flow and change and respond, that can be surprised by new experience, that can grow in understanding and deepen in compassion? How much more precious is love that can develop over time than love frozen at a single moment? How much more meaningful is beauty that can fade and return, that can be lost and rediscovered, that exists within the flowing context of temporal change? We explored the transformation of relationships in a timeless world, and we found something both touching and melancholy in those permanent sculptures of human connection. But isn't there something even more moving about relationships that can grow and change, that can weather storms and celebrate seasons, that can deepen through shared experience and mutual transformation? The embrace we imagined frozen forever is beautiful, but how much more beautiful is the embrace that can be given again and again, that can express slightly different emotions each time, that can serve as both comfort in sorrow and celebration in joy? And consciousness itself, we glimpsed the possibility of awareness as eternal presence. And there was something profound about that vision. But how much more miraculous is consciousness that can learn and forget and remember again, that can be surprised by new insights, that can discover aspects of itself it never knew existed? The consciousness we imagined suspended in eternal now is impressive. But the consciousness you possess right now, capable of following this journey through impossible realms, while simultaneously monitoring your breathing, feeling the weight of your body, perhaps beginning to drift towards sleep, is surely even more remarkable. Through our exploration of entropy frozen at its final value, we discovered the profound role that the second law of thermodynamics plays in giving time its direction and meaning. But now we can appreciate entropy not as a cosmic enemy working against order and organization, but as the universe's most creative force, the principle that drives the formation of stars, the evolution of life, the emergence of consciousness itself. Entropy doesn't destroy, it explores. It doesn't break down, it makes space for new forms of organization to emerge. The heat death we imagined postponed indefinitely might seem peaceful, but how much more interesting is a universe that continues to explore new possibilities, that continues to discover novel forms of complexity and beauty? How much more engaging is reality that can surprise itself, that can evolve in directions that couldn't be predicted from its initial conditions? In our investigation of forces frozen and fields suspended, we saw the elegant architecture of physical law made visible in unprecedented ways. But how much more dynamic and alive are these same forces when they can interact and change and create new patterns of organization? Gravity becomes not just a static curator of cosmic sculpture, but a choreographer of cosmic dance planets spiraling around stars, galaxies wheeling through space, matter organizing itself into increasingly complex and beautiful structures. And what about the nuclear forces we explored? In our frozen universe, we imagined radioactive decay paused mid-process, creating a kind of quantum sculpture gallery. But how much more remarkable are these same forces when they can complete their transformations? When unstable elements can discover stability, when stars can cook heavy elements in their nuclear furnaces and distribute them through space to become the building blocks of planets and life? The electromagnetic fields we envisioned as frozen sculptures are beautiful in their static perfection. But how much more wonderful are these same fields when they can carry information, when they can enable the aurora to dance across polar skies, when they can make possible the neural communication that creates consciousness itself? Through our exploration of impossible physics, we've actually gained a deeper appreciation for possible physics, for the elegant dance of forces and fields and particles that makes our universe not just a static work of art, but a living, breathing, evolving masterpiece of cosmic creativity. But our journey has revealed something even deeper than a new appreciation for physical law. It has shown us something profound about the nature of consciousness itself, about our remarkable capacity to transcend the limitations of direct experience through the power of imagination and thought. Think about what we've accomplished together tonight. We have imagined light frozen mid-flight, matter suspended in temporal amber, consciousness existing as eternal presence. We have explored the transformation of physical law, the suspension of biological process, the freezing of cosmic evolution itself, and we have done all of this without leaving the comfort of wherever you are right now, without stepping outside the flowing time that carries us from moment to moment. This capacity for imaginative exploration is perhaps one of consciousness's most remarkable features. We are not limited to experiencing only what is immediately present to our senses. We can imagine what has never been, explore what cannot be, discover new perspectives on what is. Through thought experiments like our journey through frozen time, consciousness reveals its ability to transcend its own apparent limitations, to explore possibilities that extend far beyond the boundaries of direct experience. And isn't this capacity for imaginative transcendence itself a kind of miracle that depends entirely on the flowing time we've been exploring? Thought experiments unfold over time. Imagination develops through temporal sequence. Understanding deepens through the gradual accumulation of insight that only becomes possible when consciousness can flow from one idea to the next, building comprehension through the patient construction of conceptual relationships. The very fact that you've been able to follow this journey to move from the initial question, what would happen if time stopped, through explorations of physics and biology and consciousness and philosophy, finally arriving at this moment of reflection and return, demonstrates the extraordinary creative power of consciousness operating within temporal flow. And this brings us to perhaps the most important insight of our entire journey, that time is not a constraint upon consciousness, but its greatest gift. Time doesn't limit what we can think and feel and imagine. It makes thinking and feeling and imagining possible in the first place. Without temporal flow, there could be no development of ideas, no growth of understanding, no deepening of wisdom, no evolution of compassion. The flowing present moment that you inhabit right now is not a prison, but a palace, the cosmic condition that makes every form of beauty and meaning and love possible. Change is not the enemy of value, but its source. Impermanence is not the opposite of significance, but its foundation. Mortality is not the negation of meaning, but the context that makes every moment precious. Consider your own life from this perspective. Every relationship you've ever formed has been possible only because time allowed you to meet and grow, to know, and gradually come to love or appreciate other people. Every skill you've developed, every insight you've gained, every moment of beauty you've experienced has emerged through the patient accumulation of temporal experience. Your personality, your wisdom, your capacity for love, all of these have developed through the flowing dance of consciousness with time. Even your capacity to rest and sleep, which may be drawing near as we approach the end of our journey together, depends on the rhythmic flow of time. Sleep is not the absence of temporal experience, but a different mode of temporal experience. Consciousness exploring different states, dreams unfolding in their own temporal sequences, the body following its own circadian rhythms of rest and restoration. And when you wake tomorrow morning, you will wake into time, into a present moment that has never existed before and will never exist again, into a day filled with possibilities that can only be explored through the forward flow of temporal experience. You will wake into a universe that is still evolving, still exploring, still discovering new forms of beauty and complexity and meaning. This is the universe we return to as our impossible journey draws to its close. Not a universe where time has stopped, but a universe where time flows like a gentle river, carrying us toward new possibilities, new insights, new forms of beauty we have yet to discover. It is a universe where consciousness and time dance together in the ongoing creation of meaning, where every moment offers the possibility of growth and transformation and deepening understanding. And perhaps most wonderfully, it is a universe where consciousness can explore its own nature through impossible journeys like the one we've shared tonight, where awareness can investigate its own boundaries by imagining what it would be like to transcend them, where thought can explore the deepest mysteries of existence through the patient construction of beautiful impossibilities. And now, dear friend, as our impossible journey through frozen time draws to its natural close, let us allow ourselves to settle gently back into the flowing present moment this particular evening, this specific now, this unique instant in the vast river of time that carries all consciousness forward into ever new possibilities for wonder and rest. Take a moment, if you will, to notice your breathing. Feel how each inhalation draws in not just air, but time itself, this moment flowing into your body, becoming part of your cellular dance, joining the temporal symphony of your existence. Notice how each exhalation releases not just carbon dioxide, but your participation in this moment, your gentle contribution to the ongoing flow of universal becoming. Your breathing is perhaps the most intimate way you participate in time's passage. Each breath, a small affirmation that you are here, now, alive and conscious in this flowing present. As you breathe, you might notice that something has shifted in your relationship with time itself. Perhaps our journey through impossible realms has left you with a new appreciation for the simple miracle of temporal flow. Maybe you're more aware now of the extraordinary gift that each passing moment represents, not a step closer to some feared ending, but a new opportunity for beauty, for connection, for the quiet miracle of conscious awareness encountering reality. The time that carries you from breath to breath is the same time that carries light from distant stars. The same time that allows flowers to bloom and seasons to change. The same time that enables love to deepen and understanding to grow. You are not separate from time's flow. You are one of its most beautiful expressions. Consciousness, riding the crest of the eternal now as it moves from what was toward what might be. Listen for a moment to the sounds around you. Perhaps there's the gentle hum of technology, the distant murmur of traffic, the soft settling of your house as the day's warmth gradually dissipates into the evening air. Each of these sounds is time made audible, pressure waves moving through air, molecular vibrations carrying information from their source to your ears. The universe's ongoing conversation with itself, made manifest as the acoustic landscape of your particular present moment. Even the silence between sounds is temporal, not the absence of time, but time in its quieter mood, duration flowing without dramatic event, but no less real for its gentleness. In our frozen universe, we imagined perfect silence, the complete absence of molecular motion capable of creating sound waves. But how much richer is this silence you're experiencing now? Silence that exists within time rather than outside it. Quiet that can be broken by new sounds. Stillness that contains infinite possibility for acoustic surprise. If you're lying in bed, feel the weight of your body against the mattress. The way gravity continues its gentle embrace, holding you to the earth as our planet spins through space at hundreds of miles per hour, while simultaneously orbiting the sun at thousands of miles per hour, while our entire solar system races through the galaxy at speeds that dwarf our everyday understanding of motion. And yet here you are, resting peacefully in what feels like perfect stillness, carried along by forces so vast and smooth that their tremendous activity feels like the deepest calm. This is time as your body experiences it, not as the relentless march toward aging and decay that we sometimes imagine, but as the gentle current that enables rest and restoration, healing and growth. Your cells are engaged right now in countless processes of repair and renewal. Your immune system is quietly patrolling for threats. Your brain is consolidating the day's experiences into memory, while preparing for the restoration that sleep will bring. All of this biological activity depends completely on time's flow, yet it happens without your conscious effort or attention. A gift of temporal process that continues as faithfully as your heartbeat. Feel that heartbeat now, if you can, that steady rhythm that has accompanied you since before your birth, and will continue until your life's final moment. Each beat is a small celebration of time's passage, a bodily affirmation of your participation in the flowing present. In our frozen universe, we imagined hearts suspended mid-beat, and there was something touching about that vision. But how much more moving is this heartbeat you can feel right now? Not frozen in eternal stillness, but alive with rhythm and variation, responsive to your emotions and activities, a drumbeat marking time in the most intimate possible way. Your heartbeat connects you to every other living being that has ever existed. All of us, sharing this same fundamental rhythm of biological time. All of us carried forward by the same basic pulse of life encountering duration. The heart beating in your chest right now beats with essentially the same rhythm that has marked biological time for millions of years, connecting you to the vast temporal community of all life on Earth. And your thoughts notice how they arise and pass away, how consciousness flows from one idea to another in the endless stream of mental activity. This is temporal consciousness at work, awareness that can remember the past, attend to the present, and anticipate the future. In our frozen universe, we explored consciousness as eternal presence, and there was something profound about that vision. But isn't there something even more remarkable about the consciousness you're experiencing right now? Flexible, responsive, capable of following complex ideas through extended development, able to hold multiple concepts in relation, while simultaneously monitoring your physical comfort and emotional state. The very fact that you've been able to follow our journey from the initial question about stopped time through explorations of physics and biology and consciousness and philosophy, finally arriving at this moment of return and integration, demonstrates the extraordinary temporal capabilities of your awareness. Your consciousness doesn't just exist in time, it dances with time, using temporal flow as the medium for its most creative and exploratory activities. Perhaps you're beginning to feel the gentle pull of sleep, that natural transition into time's most mysterious mode. Sleep is not an absence of temporal experience, but a different kind of temporal experience. Consciousness exploring alternate states, dreams unfolding in their own temporal sequences, the body following circadian rhythms that connect us to the larger temporal patterns of Earth's rotation and the cycles of day and night. In our exploration of frozen time, we considered what it might mean for consciousness to exist without temporal flow. But sleep shows us something different: consciousness that can flow through multiple states and modes. Awareness that can experience time in radically different ways within the same continuous existence. When you dream tonight, you'll experience time that can stretch and compress, sequence that can flow forward or backward or spiral into impossible configurations, all while your brain continues its temporal work of processing the day's experiences and preparing for tomorrow's possibilities. Sleep itself is one of time's greatest gifts, a regular opportunity for consciousness to explore alternate modes of temporal experience, while the body engages in the restorative processes that only become possible during these periods of altered awareness. In sleep, time becomes a different kind of medium, supporting forms of mental activity and physical renewal that the waking state cannot provide. And when you wake tomorrow morning, whether to sunlight streaming through windows or to the gentle sound of an alarm, you will wake into time. You'll open your eyes on a present moment that has never existed before in the entire history of the universe and will never exist again. You'll begin a day that contains possibilities no previous day has ever contained, opportunities for experience and growth and connection that are uniquely available in that particular flowing now. This is perhaps the most beautiful aspect of time's nature, its endless creativity, its capacity to generate genuinely new moments that contain possibilities for surprise and discovery and joy. Tomorrow's present moment won't be a repetition of any past present moment, but a completely novel configuration of cosmic possibility, a unique intersection of all the factors that create the circumstances of conscious existence. The relationships in your life will continue to evolve and deepen through time's patient alchemy. The skills you're developing will advance through temporal practice. The understanding you're gaining will continue to expand through the accumulation of experience and reflection. Even the challenges you face will transform through time's action, revealing new aspects of themselves as circumstances change and your capacity for dealing with them grows. This is time as gift rather than burden, the cosmic condition that makes all forms of beauty and meaning and love possible. Without time, there could be no music, for music is pure temporal art, sound organized in time to create beauty. Without time, there could be no stories, for stories depend on sequence and development, and the gradual revelation of meaning through narrative progression. Without time, there could be no friendship, for friendship deepens through shared experience, accumulated gradually over temporal duration. Without time, there could be no hope, for hope is consciousness oriented toward future possibility. Without time, there could be no gratitude, for gratitude reflects on past gifts and present blessings. Without time, there could be no love as we know it, for love grows and deepens and expresses itself through the patient work of attention extended over temporal duration. The flowing present moment you inhabit right now is not just your personal location in time, it's your participation in time itself, your conscious contribution to the ongoing creation of temporal reality. Through your awareness, the universe becomes conscious of its own temporal nature. Through your appreciation of beauty, time becomes aware of its own aesthetic possibilities. Through your capacity for love and compassion, temporal existence discovers its own ethical dimensions. You are not separate from time, any more than a wave is separate from the ocean. You are time, becoming aware of itself, consciousness arising within the flow, capable of reflection, wonder, and love. In you, time has achieved something extraordinary, the ability to witness and appreciate its own unfolding. The deepest insight of this journey is that the present moment isn't just a point between past and future. It is the meeting place of time and timelessness, of change and stillness. In conscious awareness, eternity and duration unite. The present holds echoes of all past moments, memories, experiences, the atoms that formed in stars. It also carries the seeds of future possibilities, intentions, choices, unfolding potential, yet it transcends both, existing as the eternal now in which all experience arises. This is why traditions across time have pointed toward presence. In the now, you don't escape time, you discover its true nature. Time becomes not a burden but a dance, not an enemy but a gift. You are both a fleeting moment and something timeless, a being in time and beyond it. The question, what would happen if time stopped, leads to a deeper realization. Consciousness itself is where time and eternity meet. Wonder the awe you feel is time's gift to you, the recognition of mystery in the heart of being. You don't need impossible scenarios to feel this. You only need this moment, this breath, this heartbeat, this awareness. The now holds more beauty, mystery, and meaning than any imagined eternity. As sleep approaches, let yourself rest in gratitude. Time gives you not just moments, but the possibility of growth, love, and joy. You are a unique expression of the cosmos, matter, energy, and awareness coming together in a form that has never existed before. And when your life transforms, as all things do, that too will be time's gift. Nothing is lost, only changed. Sleep now, carried by time's gentle current. Wake tomorrow into a new gift, a present moment never seen before. And remember, wonder is always available. It lives in your breath, your heartbeat, your awareness of now. You are time's dream, consciousness awakening, a witness to beauty, love, and mystery. Let time carry you. Let yourself rest. And when you wake, know that time still flows, wonder still calls, and the miracle of being is still unfolding always in this present moment.